Now back to Marquee Media Studio and the HaneyBiz Project with your host, Mark Haney.
All right. Welcome back to the HaneyBiz Project, brought to you courtesy of Comstocks Magazine and California Backyard. And today, I have the privilege of being joined by Mike Teel, the owner and CEO of the Raley's family of companies. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
You know, I started thinking about this. You and I don't know each other well, but people come up to me once in a while and say, oh, okay, you're Mark? Okay, so what do you do for a living? And I always say, well, I'm a small business guy, but I've got this entrepreneurial radio show. And people, it's a great conversation starter. I'm wondering what it's like. People meet you and don't know you, and it's like, oh, yeah, I'm Mike. What do you do for a living? I own Raley's. What is that? Does that stop people in their tracks?
I usually don't start with that.
What do you say? Hey, Mike, good to meet you. What do you do for a living, Mike?
I'm in the healthcare business. That's what I say. And I operate 130, I've lost count.
A lot of stores?
Yeah, supermarkets. And that kind of throws them.
Yeah, that's got to be interesting. Well, today, we've been trying to get you on the program for the last 2.5 years. We finally made it happen
Don't take
today.
it personal.
Thank you, Chelsea Minor, for making this happen. Thank you, Marquee Media, as well. But if you don't mind, take us back in time. When did you first get interested in Raley's?
Wow. Well, my first recollection of my grandfather, I was probably about 5 years old, and it was my birthday. And I remember him driving up the street where we live. And I was always excited about the present he would bring, because on my birthday, I would get a $100 bill.
Wow.
And obviously, as a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old, your parents aren't going to let you
Yeah, what do you do with the $100
But
bucks?
the thrill of seeing a $100 bill was pretty impressive, and kind of made a mark on me. It was actually my first adventure or learning about the value of money, because that money went into a savings account.
Okay.
And I wasn't able to spend it. So my parents were really good at teaching the 5 of us. I have 4 younger sisters, the value of money. But as long as I can remember growing up, I was always being the only male heir. We didn't have quite the freedom of thought back then.
Okay.
In the 50s. So there was a lot of expectations that were placed on me as a child, not only by peers, but mostly by people that were older than me talking to me, and particularly when I started working in the stores, because I started very young as a family member to experience what work was like in a store. There were expectations that were communicated to me, and I spent most of my early years resenting that.
How were they communicated to you? Was it harsh criticism? Was it motivation? What was it?
It was a gamut from, if I was you, I'd be sitting by the poolside sipping cocktails and things like that. To one day you're going to run this company and you're going to own it someday. So it was a broad gamut from A to Z. And I think I kind of grew up with an expectation that I would always be part of it. But I spent my early years in my late teens and 20s rejecting that and saying, no, you know what? I want to go out and be my own person, because I didn't really have any self-identity. And it's not well known, but I've had 3 careers at Raley's.
Okay.
My first career was out of college. Worked in the business when we had acquired our first chain in Nevada, Eagle Thrifty. Learned and experienced what it was like to see a business integrate another business. It was a great learning experience for me. Lived up in Reno for a couple of years. And then my next career, I left. I left in the business after about, 76 to 83. I left in 83, so it was 4 or 5 years. And I actually left because I really didn't see a pathway to finding myself. And it was being run by my grandfather. Sort of, he kind of stepped back by then. He was still coming to work every day. He came to work until basically he couldn't in his late 80s. But my father was involved in the company. He wasn't running it. It was being run by an outside family member, Chuck Collins, who's my mentor, a great man, and Frank McMinn, who's known as the voice of Raley's. And the three of them really were in the prime of their life and growing the company. And I just I didn't have enough self-respect. Didn't see how I could ever live up to the likes of these big men.
Yes.
And so I left, and I moved to Seattle and lived in Seattle for 6 years. And it was on that adventure that I gained my own self-worth and realized I had something to offer the company. And when the family knocked on the door 6 years later and said, we're planning the succession of this company, it's growing rapidly, and it's going to leave you behind. Do you want to be a part of it? And I
So
said,
you had proved yourself to yourself
To
in
myself.
Seattle. And actually, they came recruiting you. You had been successful enough, but they came back recruiting you.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And okay, so that's probably when you got excited about, okay, they want me, I've got a seat at the table. And then how did your career take off from there?
Well, they put me in a fast track. Most of the executives were aging. I had a lot of gray-haired executives that I worked with. I was part of the executive committee, helped the business build a strategic plan. That was one of my first chores. And then actually, after the strategic plan was built, a big component of that was succession planning, and started the actual replacement of senior executives. During that process, I worked with every major department within the company: marketing, operations, accounting, and learned what it was like, learned the needs, learned the strengths and the weaknesses, and it helped me when it came time for retiring executives to replace people that could actually do a good job. And it was through that journey of 6 years in the 80s that I took on an operations role, became chief operating officer for the company, and then ultimately the president, and then ultimately the president and CEO when my mentor Chuck retired.
So taking over as president and CEO, what year would that have been?
I've been in the late 95, 98 time frame, right before the dot-com boom of 2000. Our company actually, we had a plan to double the size of the company. And it was a plan that I had built with the then transitioning executive team. And we went from $1.5 billion to $3 billion in less than 5 years. It was a massive growth and a lot of acquisitions, many of which we have spun off over the decades with the ups and downs of the economy. It was a stressful time. I was in my mid-40s to late 40s, and it was not something that I look back on. It was a great learning experience, but I made some mistakes, and I realized that if I had been any other individual than a family member, I'd have been fired because of those mistakes. And I decided for my own self-worth I needed to leave. And so I left the business. That was my second time out.
Okay.
And I worked on the things that I felt I needed to work on as an individual. I was repairing my marriage and trying to understand what led to some of those mistakes within my personal life that I don't regret. They were great learning experiences, and I think that's one. If there was any advice that I would give to anybody that's in the stress of rapidly growing and changing business, it's recognize that stress brings down your ability to cope with things, and your flaws tend to creep out. And it's a good time to learn and understand why that happens, what causes that to happen, and work on the things that you can change in life.
Thinking about mentors, obviously you were influenced by your grandfather. You have your father, your mother. With it being Mother's Day weekend, I'm wondering how you might contrast the influence from the three.
Well, my mother is a very dominant personality in my life. She was an only child. and the whole kind of family revolved around her prior to getting married. And my dad is a quiet man. He's a quiet leader. He's a background kind of guy. He doesn't like the limelight. I take after both of them, but I do enjoy the limelight a little bit. My dad would never be here. My mother would love this kind of event. She'll have to talk. So my mom had a big influence on me, but it wasn't until my late 40s that I understood my mom. I didn't really like my mom much, which is really interesting. I blamed her for a lot of my own problems. But I came to the conclusion that my mom is a very courageous woman. She fights her weaknesses. She works on the things that she knows how to she doesn't understand, and she changes those things, because you can't change the people around you. You can only change yourself. And that was a great role model for me, and it caused me to persevere and wait for the things I wanted in my life. And a lot, as you know, Mark, a lot of things are waiting. You wait for things. It takes a lot of patience sometimes, but it also takes a lot of hard work. And I learned a lot of that from my mom. I think I got my patience from my dad. My dad is a very, very patient man, and he waits. He's also a hands-off guy. He grew up in the school laissez-faire, which means hands-off. Let things be the way they are. And he is known within the business for the many years that he worked in the business to just let things take their own course and gently steer them and be patient with things. And I judged him a lot for that. I was kind of impatient and wanted things to change. And I learned that I had to just stand back and wait a little bit more and have faith that right decisions would be made and steer and guide where it's appropriate.
You're listening to the HaneyBiz Project. We're here with Mike Teel, the CEO of Raley's, the owner, a man who is helping us to all feel a little bit more self-reflective today as we approach this Mother's Day weekend, as we think about our businesses. We're going to come back with more of Mike in just a minute. This is the HaneyBiz Project, and we'll be back in just a minute.
Welcome back to the Marquee Media Studio with Mark Haney, igniting the entrepreneurial revolution with the HaneyBiz Project.
Welcome back to the HaneyBiz Project, brought to you courtesy of Hub International and Legion ABS. I'm Mark Haney, and I have the privilege today of being rejoined by Mike Teel, the CEO of Raley's. We've been talking about taking a trip down memory lane, and I'm wondering when you first felt like it was your company. You put your signature on the company, and it was yours to lead.
Well, when I left in 2000, around 2002, and started focusing on my personal life, I eventually got things in somewhat of an order, and I started to get back in business, and that's when I experienced what small business was like, and got involved with Prosper Business Magazine, and my own adventure in the grocery business called Good Eats for a while. And I learned, that's where I learned I'm not a detail guy.
Okay.
And that was a great revelation.
Are you a dreamer?
I'm a dreamer, yeah. And I like to leave the details to others. And that was a big awakening for me. And it really helped me when time came to come back. And in 2008 or 9, the business was suffering. There had been no family leadership for some time other than at the board level. And the economy was obviously on a mega downtrend. And we had kind of lost our way a little bit. And I fought to get back into the business, but the business was a little bit reluctant to let me back. And I eventually got back by just sitting back and waiting, that patience piece, not trying to force things, but just wait. And in 2010, the opportunity became available to join the business, rejoin as the CEO, and lead a turnaround. And I had a basic idea and understanding of what needed to occur. We needed to get back to our roots, great customer service. We had the best employees in the world, I believe. and great quality products, and focus on that. And that helped us regain our sense of what we are and our sense of value, and focus our efforts on delivering great results. And we managed to take extremely negative performance and turn it into positive performance within about a year and a half. And it was during that time frame that I realized, gee, I just might have an opportunity to acquire this company. And so I started taking inventory. I knew that if I did acquire the company, I'd be working for a really long time, God willing. And I thought I would need something to keep me engaged, because I'm a little bit ADHD and I like to bounce around a lot. So I knew that it would take something meaningful. And that's when I took an inventory and looked back on my life. And I saw a thread running through it for about 20 or 30 years that involved health and wellness from many different aspects, from the birth of my first child, which I wanted to have at home and couldn't because of a cesarean, but worked hard to try to make that happen, to alternative means of prevention in your life. And then as I got into my late 40s and 50s, focusing on longevity and realizing, oh, I'm starting to age here, I want to live long. And so that thread was translated into a mission, and that's when we decided at Raley's we were going to become a purpose-driven company, meaning the reason why we come to work every day is going to be about a purpose. And that took the formulation of infusing life with health and happiness. A bit nebulous, but it was meaningful for me, and it soon became more meaningful for the rest of the organization as we explained it over a period of time.
How do you explain that to a team of thousands?
That's a great question. Well, you start with a mission statement, infusing life with health and happiness, and then we amended it with a story by changing the way the world eats one plate at a time. And I began to preach that message, that I believed that little Raley's could actually change the world. And it went back to a childhood movie in the 50s in school, where in order to teach us about nuclear fission during the Cuban crisis, they created this movie for kids where they would fill this room full of mouse traps. And on every mousetrap, there was a ping pong ball. And that ping pong ball was a neutron or a proton. And the scientists would throw this ping pong ball in the room, and all the mousetraps would just go off one at a time. You know, balls bouncing, thousands of them bouncing all over the room. And I realized, I came to the conclusion that every time we make a competitive decision on our purpose for health and wellness, somebody reacts. That ping pong ball, and then somebody else reacts, and then somebody else reacts. And so eventually your competitive decisions are changing the world indirectly. And so we're making those kinds of decisions around our mission and purpose of health and wellness by removing cigarettes, and removing soda from the registers, removing candy bars from the registers. And ultimately, I believe if we stay true to our mission, which I believe we will, we'll have a major impact on the health of our society in this world.
If you were to close your eyes and extrapolate that out, what would that look like for Sacramento? What might that look like for just the people that are impacted by Raley's?
Well, obviously we'd be healthier, and I think when we're healthier, we're happier, and it means people are thinking about food. Food really does matter in your health. It makes a big impact what you eat, and more importantly, what you don't eat. And it's really hard for us to make those decisions oftentimes because we're inundated with all kinds of products that are filled with ingredients that are really not very good for you. And it's very difficult for the consumer today to shop our stores. We're trying to change that by our shelf guide system, which points out products that are minimally processed, because minimally processed food is better for you. Products that have nutrient density, lots of nutrients and not a lot of additives. You can see that on our shelves, but you have to wade through all kinds of other products, which makes it very difficult. And we have a brand image, Mark, that people expect when they come into the store to get something that may not be healthy for them.
Yes, that's I have a few bad habits that I shop at Raley's to pick up. You got a few things in there that aren't healthy.
Right, they got quite a bit
Thank
of
you
them.
for that, by the way. But actually, I really respect what you're doing with your purpose, and so I'm even eating healthier these days because I shop at Raley's.
Well, thank you. But that my frustration with shopping our own stores led to the innovation of a new brand, Market 515, which is going to open up. Just so happens on my birthday, May 15th, which you might hear a little. Maybe
Love
that
it.
explains the name of it, 515. But there's a deeper meaning in Market 515. It's a small store. It's a neighborhood store in the downtown area of Sacramento, but it'll be mostly naturally organic product line, which is going to be heavily curated, chosen products that are good for you, that have ingredients that are good for you, and the ingredients that are bad for you have been eliminated.
So it's called Market 515. It sounds like a secret code. So you're basically testing something in the middle of Sacramento that, if it works, could change the industry.
Yeah, it would expand. Yeah. So it stands for Market 515. We had to have a meaning to it besides just my birthday, May 15th. There's 5 senses. Okay. Taste, touch, feel, and there's 5 main nutrients that exist for food, and the one between the 2 5s is organic, natural, and education. So there's a big education element. Our people that work in those stores will be highly educated and understand the products that they're selling.
I love it. Well, my birthday is 2 days after yours. Maybe I'll do Mark 517. I don't have a strategy beyond that, but I like the secret code. I like the idea of doing something, testing something and seeing. And I think we can learn from that. Test something, but go all in to do it right. And I think a lot of us can learn from that. So thinking about the grocery industry, we're going to talk after the break a little bit more. You brought in Steve Brandkamp with you, but thinking about technology and how that is changing the landscape of the grocery business. You want to touch on that before we go to break?
Sure. I think the biggest part of technology that's touched the industry is transformed with scanning, but that's like 40 years old now.
Yeah.
I think digital marketing is a big transformation aspect. In fact, it's the piece that's causing the most struggle within the industry, the online piece, determining how much of our market growth is being eroded by online shopping. We're fortunate at Raley's. We addressed this early, and out of the conventional markets, we're the only one in the region that's growing. So we have a growing market share, and I believe that's due not only to our mission or purpose, people are recognizing that, but also because of a great, strong digital marketing team.
Love it. We've been talking about the potential next generation of Raley's, the family of companies. Mike Teel is sharing his personal story. When we come back, we're going to be bringing on a guy named Steve Brandkamp. He is with United Natural Foods. Join the revolution at HaneyBiz.com, brought to you courtesy of Ethan Conrad Properties. This is the HaneyBiz Project.